In this video, we'll explore how to create a column and line combo chart. To do this, we'll utilize a new DAX function called calculate. But before we jump into that, let's address what business requirements this is accomplishing. So from our previous videos, we've now completed most of the matrix table and the running total chart. We'll continue to address the data visualizations requirements by completing the requirement for a year-over-year net profit comparison by month. That data, when visualized, will use a column and line combo chart as seen here. This visualization is great when you want to show two or more perspectives of data on the same chart, because it has a single x-axis and multiple y-axes to accommodate data both as columns and as lines. Now, to create this visualization, we'll need to leverage a new DAX function called calculate. So let's address that first. As I mentioned in the last section, a lot of what makes DAX powerful is its ability to use filters when it's calculating values. So let's explore that a bit further and talk about how the calculate function works. The calculate function, at its core, gives us the ability to apply filters to a new or existing calculation. More specifically, calculate lets us add, remove, or modify filter context. To see that in practice, let's take a look at three measure examples. Here we can see where our net profits are being calculated, but where there is a filter added for product category equals audio. This means that it will only calculate the net profits for just that specified category. We can also remove filters, in this case calculating net profits for everything but the audio category. And lastly, calculate can also modify filters, meaning it can do more complex tasks such as time intelligence filtering. In this example, we can ask the function to calculate net profits, but for the previous year, as seen in the filter for this calculation. To further understand how these three work, let's take a look at a table in Power BI and see how they're calculating. Here's a matrix table example from Power BI, with an example for each of the three filter concepts we're discussing. Our add filters example over here is seen applied in this audio profits column, where it's calculating a portion of net profits, but only for audio products. Additionally, the remove filters calculation, where it's specifying that product category does not equal audio, can be seen here, calculating the net profits for everything but the audio category. And lastly, the modify filters example is calculating the net profits, but for the previous year as seen here. We can also confirm this is happening if we take a look at January 2009's previous year profit value. This value matches the value from January 2008, which is exactly what we wanted to return. The great thing with this calculation too is that this would work regardless if my visualizations was showing the date, month, quarter, or year. That date add function we see in the filter grabs the previous year's value for whatever date range is showing in the visualization. It's really powerful, and we'll see more of it when we create this in our file. Alright, now that we have a basic understanding of the calculate function, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do to create these new set of calculations is I'm going to be able to copy and paste one of these visualizations to be able to save a lot of the effort that I did so I don't have to go ahead and format it again. So I'm going to come up to my net profit running total, and I'm actually going to copy and paste this. So that'll be Control C and then Control V to reuse that. I'm going to put that about right over here, got a little bit bigger. And I'm actually going to set this up a little bit just so you can watch it be built out. So I'm going to temporarily move these out of the way and put this just right in the corner so we can have a nice zoomed perspective on this. Now I can go ahead and clean this up too, because one of our requirements is the fact that we want to have this at the month and year level. So I'm going to delete quarter from the axis, and I'm going to delete day. And I'm going to use that hierarchy to open it up to the month level down here. There we are. We have all the months available there, and let's go ahead and swap out that running total. Of course, we're not going to need that, so we'll delete that from the value and the color saturation. And I can move the net profit from tooltips to the value. There we are. Perfect. So we currently have net profit in here. What I also want to be able to show is the current year net profit, whatever that prior year for that month net profit was, and then finally that really nice line in the combo chart. Now it's still showing up here as a clustered column chart. If we actually zoom in and take a look, we can see that there's a couple of combo charts as well. There's a line and clustered column chart here. There's also a stacked line and clustered column chart. So let's go ahead and convert this to the clustered line and column chart here. And we'll see that a couple of things changed in here. We now have a shared axis for the month and year. And now, as you can see, we have an additional option for line values to add into this. So I'm going to start first thing and create that previous year calculation. Come up to DAX measures, right click and select new measure. I'm going to come over here to the measures window and I'm going to type in PY for previous year, net profits. There we are, equals calculate. And as we discussed in the slides, this evaluates an expression in a context modified by filters. So it calculates a measure, new or existing, and then it goes ahead and applies, meaning like it will add, remove, or modify filters. So we want to calculate. And for this expression portion, as a best practice, you want to avoid having those naked columns in here if you can. So that would be the sum of sales amount or whatever that might be. You want to avoid having those in here. Instead, the only things that you should have as a practice in the expression portion is another DAX calculation that's already been pre-written. The goal of that being to reduce the overhead and updates and the number of connections back to that original table. It lets them build upon each other very nicely. So I'm going to calculate net profit, and then I'm going to use date add, which will move the given set of dates by a specified interval. Now, it's called date add, and I feel that's almost a bit of a red herring in terms of the name. It really should be called date modify, because I can both add or subtract dates. And what goes into here, and it's really important, is this first section that specifies dates. That should be the column from your calendar table. That's a thing that is keyed or linked using a relationship back to your data table. So I'm going to type in date, calendar date here. The number of intervals will be -1. And what that interval will be is going to be the year. Because I want it to go back 1 year for whatever date range we are looking at. Whether or not that's the date, the month, the quarter, or the year. There we are. And make sure to close both parentheses, not just the first one, because as we can see here, it's indicating that it's only closing date add. I also want it to close the calculate function. I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to come up to modeling, and I'm going to format this as a currency as well. Set that to currency general and 0 decimal. Perfect. Now let's come over here, take our previous year net profits, and add this to our column values so we can see it in action. It's added that onto the chart up here, and we can see that there's now 2 columns for each single month and year that's in our data. We can even confirm this once again. Let's go ahead and take July 2009. We can see that it's saying that the previous year net profits for 2009 July was 55 million. Now we can go back to 2008 July, and there is that same 55 million in here. So it is retrieving whatever those net profits were, but not for this date, for whatever column it's on, but for that previous year period. Now we do have some spots in here that are empty because they do not have any previous year net profits because that was the first year of sale for the company. So we can actually get rid of those by coming down to the visual level filters down here. Now these filters, by the way, that you're seeing in this section, these are filters that apply only to this visualization. Just as a reminder, like if I click off this visualization, there are no filters for visual level. There's page level filters, which affects anything on the entire page, and report level, which affects anything in the entire report if you add filters there. But the visual filters show up only when you are selecting a visualization. So I'm going to apply some filters to this. So you can see that right now it already is mirroring all the filters in here, the 4 things that I've added to my visualization. My shared axis, month and year are located here, plus net profit and previous year net profits that I've added to column values. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to change this to a, rather than is less than, I'm going to say is not blank, which will get rid of those months that had no previous year profit. I'm going to select apply. There we are, and you see how that cleaned it up very nicely up in here. So the next 2 calculations I'm going to do is I want to create the year-over-year profit dollar value, and then finally create that percentage difference. I'm going to come up to DAX measures again, select new measure, come up to the measure window and type YOY for year-over-year net profits, and that's going to be equal to net profits minus prior year net profits. Hit enter. Go ahead and format that as a currency as well, 0 decimal places. Now I'm not going to use this one in the visualization because again, I want to have a percentage showing as a line. So we'll use this in a minute and we'll see in another spot. But for now, this is just going to hang out here and be referenced in our last calculation. So finally, last one to do, right click, new measure. This will be year-over-year net profits percentage. And that's going to be equal to the divide function to do a comparison because I want to divide my year-over-year net profits by my prior year. So that's going to tell me whether or not it was a 5%, 10, 15, 20% increase or negative 5%. So I now know that delta between the two as a percentage or a ratio rather than a dollar value. Close that parentheses and specify that this time as a percentage. Drop that down to 1. And now I can take this, add this into my line values here. And there we go. We can see that showing up in our chart. Now it's still a little busy, so there's a couple other things that I would like to clean up to make it really pop and to help draw the eyes to the important values. Because I like that the columns are there, but I don't need data labels on them. I only want data labels for my percentages. So I'm going to come up here to the Format Painter, and I'm going to go to the data labels. And all the way down at the bottom, there is an option to customize series, meaning customize every data label individually. So if I turn that on, I now have the option for net profit to show or hide. So I can disable net profit, and I'm also going to disable it for the previous year net profits. So all I'm left with now is a line value that's showing with the data label just for that. I can still get the other values if I hover over it, but I no longer have all that extra noise kind of showing on this chart. Now additionally, what I like to do is now that I have a legend showing, I like to keep that separated from the title just because it can get a little busy. So I'm going to drop that down from the top to the bottom center, which creates a nice frame for this visualization. And lastly, I'm going to go back over to the fields list, and the year-over-year net profits that I calculated but haven't used yet, I'm going to add that tooltips down here. So now a person has the access to be able to see the percentages all across these, and if they want to, they can hover and get that additional information, which can be really valuable. So they can see what their previous year value was, their current year value, and finally the actual raw number delta between the two of them. Let's go ahead and move this over here, put everything kind of back in place. Perfect. And I can show you too how this is working at both the month, the quarter, or the year level. Let me come back up to the shared axis and actually add all the levels of the hierarchy back in, which by the way, if you need to do that after you've deleted some of them, you can actually click the down arrow, select date hierarchy, and you can see that it adds all of them back in. And if we come over here to those hierarchy options, it's showing the year, and here's the difference between the 2 years. It's now still calculating at the quarter level. It's also still calculating again at the month level. So any level that we want to be able to shift up and down with, it will continue to calculate the current versus prior and give us that percentage. So it's a really great way to add a lot of functionality for users to be able to drill in and out of their data as much as necessary. So I'm going to leave that back at the month level, and I'm actually going to get rid of quarter and day because the client for these requirements does not need that. And now we are left with just the year and the month. So that about covers it for this video. In our next video, we're going to explore how to do conditional formatting and add those year-over-year calculations to our matrix table, as well as learn how to create a waterfall chart, which is a really great way to show variability or deltas between categories or objects. So I'll see you then.